This video shows you how I adjusted the valves on my Honda NC750X. This is where I want to be, and these are the steps to get there. First of all, I took the bottom cowl off. There's just a screw on each side and then push pins to pull it out. It seems that in theory you can do this job without actually removing the radiator, but I decided to remove the radiator so I had room to work. It's not very difficult. There's just a bolt on the top and the bottom, and then two hose clamps to undo. You'll lose a little bit of coolant, but that's okay. I found that about a litre of coolant gets drained out this way. It's just from the radiator and the hose. With the radiator drained, I can remove the top hose from the radiator, and then the overflow hose. There's a bit of fiddle farting to get to the van motor connector plug, but I finally got that out. With all that released, then the radiator comes out, nice and clean. Once I've tucked away a couple of hoses, I've got a nice clear spot to work on the tappet cover. The tappet cover's held with only 3 bolts, and you also need to remove the breather hose at the top. With all the bolts removed, it was an easy step to just remove the tappet cover entirely. Now I've got a clear view of all the tappets and the cam. But before I can check clearances, I need to put the engine in the correct position. This is done by removing these 2 bolts. Now I can move the engine in a counterclockwise direction until I see the T mark for either cylinder 1 or cylinder 2. It's a bit hard to see into the hole, so here's the schematic. It shows a mark with T and then either 1 or 2 on it to show whether it's cylinder 1 or cylinder 2. To ensure you're at top dead centre, there's also a mark on the cam chain sprocket with either T1 or T2 on it. As a final check, I should be able to woggle every one of those tappets. Now I can select the appropriate feeler gauge size and measure the gaps. I've got a 0.28 and a 0.18, which is close enough to 0.17. I found that the exhaust on number 1 was too tight. It was only at 0.23, so I had to adjust these. This is a simple matter of just undoing the nut and then turning the screw until it's just firmish on the 0.28 feeler gauge, and then tightening it up again while holding the screwdriver. I found that the inlet gaps on number 1 were fine. Then turning the motor to the T2 position, I found that the exhaust gaps on cylinder 2 were fine, but the inlet gaps were not fine. They were too tight. So again, I had to adjust these. Finally, just go over the nuts again, just to be sure that you did actually tighten the ones up after you adjusted it. And now you can put everything back together again. Just to be sure, I use a bit of gasket silicone on the seal for the tappet cover. And I haven't forgotten to refill the coolant. Got to take out this little locking screw before you can actually take the lid off. and as I said, I found that it was close enough to a litre that I had to put back in. With everything back together, I can give it a run, and then when it's cooled down again, I'll double check the coolant just to be sure. I have to admit I'm surprised that the valve clearances weren't actually in spec. The bike's 12 months old and I've only done just under 19,000 kilometres. But the whole job only took an hour, so no big dramas.